Hey folks, this is Pat Quinn with the JoBlo Movie Network, welcoming film fans worldwide for another round of Show Me the Sequel. As always, we're focusing on a genre film that never got the follow-up it deserved. I'll start with a quick recap, share some behind-the-scenes stories, and then pitch my concept for a sequel. Today's subject is a film that just about everybody wants to see more of, including the cast and the filmmakers. So let's get this party started and say his name 3 times: Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. For the 5 people out there who haven't seen Beetlejuice, it's director Tim Burton's unique blend of fantasy, comedy, and calypso tunes. The film stars Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis as the Maitlands, a young couple living in the country who've just been killed in a car crash. They return to the old house that they've been renovating and realize that they've become ghosts. The house is sold to Charles and Delia Dietz, played by Jeffrey Jones and Catherine O'Hara. The Dietzes move in, and right away they begin remodeling. Taking advice from The Handbook for the Recently Dead, the Maitlands try to scare the new owners away. That attracts the attention of a young Winona Ryder, cast as the Dietzes' goth geek daughter, Lydia. Desperate to get rid of the Dietzes, the ghost couple calls in a bio-exorcist by saying his name 3 times. Wearing his iconic black and white striped suit, Michael Keaton appears as Beetlejuice. The actor is only on screen for less than 15 minutes, but he dominates the film. Keaton's Beetlejuice is equal parts sideshow carny, used car salesman, and Rodney Dangerfield. He promises to get the Dietzes out, but only if Lydia agrees to marry him. Haunted hijinks ensue involving an exorcism, stop-motion sandworms, and a dance number built around the Harry Belafonte calypso tune, Deo. Needless to say, if you haven't seen it yet, stop listening to me and go rent it right now. Released in 1988, Beetlejuice was the 10th highest grossing movie that year and won an Oscar for Best Makeup. It made a star out of Keaton and introduced mainstream audiences to Tim Burton's distinct vision as a filmmaker. So distinct that in 2010, the Museum of Modern Art in New York mounted a retrospect of his career, which included artwork as well as costumes, props, and storyboards from his films. But back in 1984, he was still an unemployed animator shopping his short film Frankenweenie to the studios. Paul Rubens saw the short and hired him to direct Pee-wee's Big Adventure. The film was a hit, and Tim Burton started looking for his next project. Executive David Geffen sent him a script written by Michael McDowell, who Burton had just worked with on an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. The original script was much darker than what ended up on the screen, and rather than a wisecracking bio-exorcist, Beetlejuice was a winged demon who transforms into a short Middle Eastern man, more Peter Lorre than Michael Keaton. At the film's climax, he even takes on the form of a vicious and rabid squirrel. The producers then brought in Warren Scarron to do a rewrite which drastically lightened the film's tone. This included the new scenes set in the afterlife with Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis in the waiting room. Scarron also introduced many of the musical elements, though in his script, the iconic dinner party scene used an old R&B tune called If I Didn't Care by the Ink Spots, and not Harry Belafonte's Deo. At that point, Beetlejuice was still a Middle Eastern man, and Tim Burton had a brilliant idea for the role: Sammy Davis Jr. That's right, official Rat Pack member and Mr. Bojangles himself. An interesting side note, Sammy Davis Jr. did play a demon in a 1973 TV movie called Poor Devil. Sammy is given one last chance by Lucifer, played by who else? Christopher Lee, to get Jack Klugman to sign away his soul. Poor Devil is available on YouTube and is just as strange as it sounds. As the character of Beetlejuice evolved, other actors were considered, including such obvious choices as Bill Murray, Robin Williams, and Jim Carrey. Some not-so-obvious options were John Cleese, Dudley Moore, and my favorite out-of-left-field suggestion, Sam Kinison. Eventually, David Geffen suggested Michael Keaton, and the rest, as they say, is history. Another issue of debate was the film's title. Warner Brothers hated the name Beetlejuice and wanted to call it House Ghosts. As a joke, Tim Burton offered the title Scared Sheetless. To his horror, they loved the idea, and it took some coaxing to get them to agree to the original name. Fast forward to the spring of 1988. The film is out in theaters and it's a big hit. One would think Beetlejuice 2 would be inevitable, and for a while, it was. In 1990, Tim Burton had a wacky idea. Wouldn't it be cool to make an early 60s beach movie like the ones with Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon? Except shoot it in the style of German expressionistic films like Nosferatu and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I know, but wait, it gets better. Instead of Annette and Frankie having fun in the sun, it's Lydia and Beetlejuice, and the title would be Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. Suddenly casting Sammy Davis Jr. doesn't seem so weird now, does it? Playwright Jonathan Gems, who would later write the script for Mars Attacks, was brought in to take a first pass at the unusual concept. The story he came up with had the Dietz's family moving to Hawaii, where Jeffrey Jones was hired to develop a resort. Unfortunately, it turns out they're building it on the burial ground of an ancient Hawaiian kahuna. The spirit of the big kahuna is awoken and troubles ensue faster than you can say, "Make mine a Mai Tai." It's at this point that his name is said 3 times and Beetlejuice comes to the rescue. Apparently the film ends with Beetlejuice using magic to win a surfing contest. Just reading that sentence gives me visions of Fonzie in his leather jacket and swim trunks water skiing over a shark. By the way, if you're curious, the script for Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian can easily be found online. In fact, there's even a blog where they read it out loud. I didn't have the patience, but yeah, go for it. This is where things get a little murky. In 1991, Daniel Waters was brought in to do a rewrite. Waters had hit it big with the script for Heathers, but followed it up with 2 duds: The Adventures of Ford Fairlane with Andrew Dice Clay, and then Hudson Hawk with Bruce Willis. But Tim Burton's time was being consumed with Batman Returns, and he had Waters switch over to that project. 2 years later, David Geffen hired Pamela Norris to work on the project. Her biggest credit was co-writing Troop Beverly Hills, starring Shelley Long. Remember that one? Neither do I. By now, they've abandoned the Hawaiian angle for something more in line with the first film. In 1996, Kevin Smith, who had just released Chasing Amy, was approached by Warner Brothers. But he declined, and instead, he went to work on Tim Burton's ill-fated Superman Lives script that would have starred Nicolas Cage. Eventually, Warner Brothers hired Seth Grahame-Smith, who had collaborated with Tim Burton on Dark Shadows, to write and produce the sequel to Beetlejuice. In the spring of 2015, Grahame-Smith reported that the script was done and that Tim Burton, Keaton, and Winona Ryder would start filming by the end of the year. But for whatever reason, the end of the year came and went without anyone saying his name 3 times. Then, Mike Vukadinovich was hired to rewrite the new script. An odd choice, since his main credits were writing and producing Jim Carrey's recently canceled television show, Kidding. Perhaps Warner Brothers were also kidding, because in April 2019, they announced that the sequel had been officially shelved. This may seem like a bizarre chain of events, but it really is business as usual in Hollywood. Unless you're Aaron Sorkin or Steve Zaillian, everyone's script gets rewritten by someone else. It's worth noting that there was a popular, if short-lived, animated Beetlejuice series on ABC that ran from 1989 to 1991. And more recently, a musical version of the film opened on Broadway. The show was a hit, but sadly, like all live theater across the country, it had to abruptly end its run due to the pandemic. But neither of them was a sequel in any shape or form. So, let's talk from a fan's point of view about a sequel. Some of my favorite scenes are the ones with Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis in the afterlife, the 2 of them in the waiting room or walking through the filing office with the skeletons typing memos. Those are moments that, while obviously limited by a tight budget, are filled with visual imagination. If there was a sequel, I'd want to see a lot more of the afterlife. Another thing is the music. Danny Elfman's amazing score, along with Harry Belafonte's calypso tunes. In the original script, the film did end as it does now, with Lydia lip-syncing a song, but rather than Belafonte's Jump in the Line, Shake Sonora, she sang along with Percy Sledge belting out When a Man Loves a Woman. A great song, but not the right song. The Belafonte tracks are like the film's visuals, quirky, colorful, and unexpected. The sequel should have an equally eclectic soundtrack and feature Beetlejuice in a big production number. So, with all that in mind, here's my pitch for a sequel to Tim Burton's classic film, Beetlejuice. Lydia, played by Winona Ryder, still lives in Winter River, Connecticut. She and her ex-husband Tom share custody of their 16-year-old daughter, Jenny. One night, Lydia has a vivid dream about the Maitlands. She tells her mother, Delia, played by Catherine O'Hara, that in the dream, Alec Baldwin was comforting a visibly upset Geena Davis. Her mother reminds her that their spirits moved on years ago when the Dietzes sold the old house. But that night, Lydia has the same dream. She still has a copy of The Handbook for the Recently Dead and decides to hold a seance. Delia, Jenny, and a reluctant Tom all agree to be a part of it. A quick casting note, in my mind, Tom is the straight man who reacts to all the spooky chaos. I'm thinking Steve Carell or maybe Paul Rudd. During the seance, they raise the spirit of the Maitland's afterlife caseworker. Original actress Sylvia Sidney passed away in 1999, so I'd cast Betty White this time. The caseworker tells them that the Maitlands were scheduled to move on years ago, but due to a clerical error, they were sent to purgatory instead. She's far too busy to look for two lost souls, but Lydia is more than welcome to try. According to the handbook, the living can cross over to the other side if they have a willing tour guide. She gives Lydia an official letter which states that the Maitlands were meant to move on. Then, realizing she's late for a meeting, the caseworker vanishes. Lydia only has one option, and despite Delia's protest, she says his name 3 times. Beetlejuice appears, and they strike a deal. He'll be her guide if they can finally get married. She agrees, and Beetlejuice opens a spirit door into the netherworld. When he does, a zombie puppy comes bounding through the door. Beetlejuice is supposed to be watching his cousin's dog, and he asks Jenny to keep an eye on him while they're gone. Side note, this would be a great way for Tim Burton to bring back his stop-motion canine creation, Frankenweenie. Beetlejuice also warns Tom and Delia to keep the spirit door closed, or they might get some uninvited guests. According to their file, the Maitlands were sent to Sin City, a section of purgatory where lost souls go who've earned time off from the sulfur mines. Remember Pleasure Island in the Disney version of Pinocchio, where all the bad little boys drink beer, smoke cigars, and eventually turned into donkeys? That's pretty much Sin City. Beetlejuice takes Lydia on a tour of all his favorite bars until they end up at Hell's A-Poppin', the sketchiest nightclub in town. In the first film, Beetlejuice hung out at Dante's Inferno Room. Combine that place with the Mos Eisley Cantina and you've got Hell's A-Poppin'. They walk in just as the floor show starts. There's a skeleton band playing as a chorus line of dancers come out on stage. Lydia does a double take when she sees that Geena Davis is one of the dancers, and Alec Baldwin is operating the spotlight. Meanwhile, Delia, Tom, and Jenny have their hands full trying to keep Frankenweenie from escaping. They manage to calm him down with a snack of spoiled hamburger meat, but at some point in all the commotion, the dog had accidentally opened the spirit door, and there's a ghostly hand on the doorknob. Lydia is backstage at Hell's A-Poppin', reuniting with the Maitlands. The manager tells Geena to go change for the next number. Lydia shows him the official letter, but he doesn't care and it goes up in a burst of flame. Lydia says they'll have to make a run for it, and she tells Beetlejuice that they need a distraction. When the skeleton band starts playing, Beetlejuice leaps on stage and takes over the show, singing a crazed version of I Put a Spell on You by Screamin' Jay Hawkins. With the crowd and the manager distracted, Lydia and the Maitlands dash out the back door and manage to ditch Beetlejuice. They return to the caseworker's office, and she promises to send the Maitlands forward. They escort Lydia to the spirit door to say goodbye, but there's a line of ghosts and ghoulish creatures at the door. The Maitlands hold them back so Lydia can get through just as Beetlejuice shows up. The path looks clear for Lydia to get home when suddenly a giant tentacled creature lunges towards the spirit door. Delia and Tom pull her through just in time. Beetlejuice also got through, and he's ready to get married. He calls up a priest and conjures up a wedding dress. But Frankenweenie once again opens the spirit door, and a giant tentacle pours through, grabs Beetlejuice, and pulls him back into the netherworld as Jenny slams the door shut for good. The film ends with Tom, Lydia, and Jenny walking in the park with their new dog, a disguised Frankenweenie. Okay, that's it. A sequel with a lot of opportunities for cool visuals, fun music, and most importantly, no one goes to Hawaii. That's my pitch, so let me know what you think. And if you have your own idea for a sequel to Beetlejuice, please share in the comments section below. This is Pat Quinn saying thanks for tuning in, and until next time, aloha and make mine a Mai Tai.